The West Asian region is known to be volatile. Their politics, economics and society often shape the world. There is a constant tussle between governments and what they call the Western influence. But in this tussle, one gender is taking a slow death. In the past few months, Iran's brutal stance against women and their rights has come to the fore. From hijab protests to dancing in public, Iranian women have been pushed back every single time. That hasn't stopped the women leading their historic marches. But what that has done is more bodies on the streets and more crowded prison cells. Today, Supreme Leader has announced a pardon. Tens of thousands of people will be let go. This was the front page of almost every pro-regime media firm. But let me give you the bigger picture. Tehran wants you to believe that the protests have stopped. Look at this statement coming in from the judiciary. It says that during the recent events, a number of young people have committed crimes because of the enemy's propaganda. Since the foreign enemy's plans have been foiled, many of these youths now regret their actions. Because it's Iran, we don't know how many women are among those pardoned. But what we can tell you is that the crackdown is still on. Over the weekend, 2 women journalists, who also happen to be twin sisters, have been arrested. What was their crime? They are journalists who were doing their job. They were reporting on the anti-government protests. The situation is no better in neighboring Iraq. A woman YouTuber was strangled to death by her own father. He was angry with her for fleeing to Turkey, but she said that her own brother sexually abused her, and after she complained, the father did not take any action. After finding no hope at home, she also approached the police, but the officials didn't want to intervene in family affairs. In another rare move, Iraqi women have come out onto the streets asking for justice. They want the judiciary to amend Article number 409. Now, this article reduces a murder sentence to a maximum of 3 years if a man with his female dependent in a state of adultery and kills her. Protesters say that this indirectly allows men to kill their daughters or sisters on the pretext of honor killing. In Iraq, till date, no law criminalizes domestic violence. More than 75% of gender-based violence victims are women. There is a clear pattern in these countries, and West Asia is not alone. Laws in so many countries are designed to oppress women. There are laws made by men, implemented by men, and punished by men. So what choice does this leave the woman? Well, not nothing. Mahasa Amini in Iran, Tiba al-Ali in Iraq, and Alaa Salah in Sudan are testament to call for a change. These are women defying the shackles of patriarchal regimes, and they are giving hope for a West Asia that will be forced to see women as equals. Now, for more on this, we are being joined by Lynn O'Donnell. She is an author and a journalist based in London. Now, Lynn, we have seen today the Supreme Leader issuing pardons. Does this in any way represent a slight softening in the regime's stance?
Hi, Alison. Thanks for having me. You know, I don't really think so. I think that the history of protest in Iran in recent decades has shown that moves by the regime to ameliorate protesters, to calm them down, usually just lead to the strengthening of the regime. I wouldn't really put any store by this, and I wouldn't even say that it's a concession to the protesters, to be honest with you. What we've seen over recent major spikes up in public protest is that people eventually are pushed out of the country. When I was living in Afghanistan during the revolution, very, very many Iranian journalists crossed the border into Afghanistan feeling that they would be safer and out of the reach of the regime once they got there. So I think that one day, one release, one statement from the regime is too little to make any judgment on where we're going to go forward. It's usually a case in Iran that the regime doubles down.
Right. And then following the situation in Iraq, what are we seeing now? Are the protests still on, or have they slowed down since we've seen the hangings and the crackdown then still on?
You know, it's very difficult to get good quality information out of Iran that covers the entire country. But there doesn't seem to be, from the people that I'm talking to, have been any real slowdown in the level of protest and anger with the government. People have to work, they have to go to university, they have to keep learning, they have to get on with their lives. This is the case for all. But I just think that, you know, whatever is happening on the surface is an awful lot bubbling under. The anger hasn't dissipated, and I think we'll continue to see a very strong response from a public that has already, over the past 5 or 6 months, become used to expressing its anger with the government. I think that anger will continue to bubble under, and we'll probably see spikes up and down in public in coming months as well.
Right, and then can you take us through the latest that we've seen coming out of Iraq, where there was Al-Ali, who was brutally murdered by her own father under the guise of an honor killing?
Well, you know, as you said earlier, Iraqi women very bravely took to the street. It's not often that they do that, but at least there is an atmosphere in Iraq prevailing that gives them the feeling that they are safe to do so. But, you know, the law against domestic violence and honor killing has been languishing in the Iraqi parliament for quite some time, for years, without being passed. And what this means is that men can kill the women in their lives, call it an honor killing, and do so with impunity. It is even allowed under Iraqi law for men to beat their wives. Now, you could beat your wife to death and say, well, you know, I suspected her of adultery, or this was an honour action, and get away with it, maybe with a maximum, I think, of up to 3 years in prison. So women are not protected under Iraqi law. As you said, laws made by men, for men, and punished by men. And what happened to Miss Ali, I think, last week is just one more example of the impunity that men have for treating women with violence. And what they're asking for is something that already exists in potential, for that law against domestic violence, protecting them from violence by men, to be passed.
Right. And in your opinion, what is the hope of women achieving equality in these regions?
Oh, in my lifetime, probably not much, but at least there are efforts, and women are feeling such great frustration that they are taking their protests public. But I fear that what we see happening in Afghanistan, where the Taliban have basically disappeared women, is setting an example. The United Nations has a very influential presence in Afghanistan. It's not really doing anything more than talking to the Taliban about what they are doing to women. The United States also still has a very loud voice in the region. And I think that it's all very well to say, you know, we're outraged by the way women are being kept out of school, kept out of work, forced into hijab, kept in their homes, but without consequences, and there are no consequences, then I don't think that we will see action. Women are very bravely going onto the streets, as you say, in Iran, Iraq, and in Afghanistan, even in smaller and smaller numbers. But they're being pushed back. And until we see real change on the books in the law that protects women from violence and guarantees their rights, I don't really believe that we're going to see substantial and meaningful change.
Right. Then thank you very much for your valued insights and being with us on the show.
Thanks, Alison.
WION, now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.